Honestly, I was hoping I wouldn't have to make this video. So as you may know, I made a video a little while back about this quite frankly very bad mascot horror game called Sparky Marky and expressed excitement for the next game that its developers were working on, one called Zoochosis. And there, I mentioned that I didn't want to have to make this video, so I requested that they, at least try to make the game good. Well, Zoochosis came out recently, and, well, you're watching this video, so you could probably guess how it turned out. But believe it or not, the state of the game has vastly improved since release, and I waited to make this specifically to give it some time to solidify. Regardless, though, it's still a real weird game with real weird flaws that can't all just be ironed out by patches. It's gonna be a bit of a turbulent review. The game does not offer the option to revert back to previous patches, probably for good reason, so I have to establish a cutoff date for what patches I'll be playing with and what I won't. My cutoff date for game patches is October 18th, because that's the day I'm playing the game a bunch and writing the script, and I don't want to have to keep going back and changing things because of daily game updates. Because they update this thing a lot, even if it's tiny little patches that are like 37 megabytes. This cutoff date includes the first major update, aka Taking Blood, which added the option to take blood from animals from different angles. For context, I remember finding it annoying to get blood samples when I first played.
How do I get the gorilla liquids?
I don't know. When does the scary shit happen? We've been playing this game for like an hour and nothing scary happened.
I can't figure out how to get her blood!
You were the scariest thing in this game so far.
But when getting footage for this video, God, it was no problem. So I guess that's a good update. Back to the main topic, I don't think the reason this game released in the state it did was due to a lack of testing. I honestly tried to revert the game back to previous updates for consistency using console shenanigans, and through the Steam Depot you can see they've been testing this thing since like 4 months ago. I believe they may not have tested it correctly though, or just really wanted to get it out in October and ended up rushing it, and didn't fix stuff they figured they could fix post-release. But release time is the main time most people are gonna play your game. Unless they love it day one, they're probably not gonna keep coming back to try out patches. I mean, heck, I didn't want to play it again for this video because of the shoddy state of it on release. I just remembered that it wasn't a fun time. But enough yapping about patches. Despite all of them, I still firmly believe that Zoochosis isn't a fun time, nor is it written well or executed well. No matter how much you fix bugs with uninteresting gameplay, that gameplay stays the way it is. It just functions now and doesn't blow up your computer. But what is that gameplay? Well, here's a quick background. Zoochosis, subtitle Rescue the Animals, is a 3D body cam horror simulation game, their words not mine, about working as a zookeeper in the world's least OSHA-compliant zoo. A parasite runs amok in the animal enclosures, and it has the ability to mutate any infected animal into a horrifying monster. Your main task is to identify the mutated animals and cure them before they're turned into shells of what they should be. Plus, you gotta make sure that if they do mutate, you prevent uninfected animals from being eaten by the monster, whether that be by reverting the mutation, stalling the monster, or just straight up euthanizing it. While handling all that, it's up to you to see if you can figure out what the zoo's really been hiding and shut it down for good this time. I forgot to mention it's been shut down for 2 years already in universe. You play as Paul Connolly, and your first task is to sign an NDA. Simple, right? Well, you can make that not so simple by just not doing it. At least, so I've been told. Doc should speak to you and belittle you, calling a hotline and using a voice recording of you to taunt you.
All right, I didn't want to do this, but it seems I have to. Listen.
Hello, you've reached the emergency suicide helpline. How can we help you?
I got nothing. I've been unemployed for a year. I lost my house. My money is gone. No life. My family. Damn it. I just can't face them. Lily, Gina, they're great. None too good for me. I'm just a stupid failure.
What? Where did you get this?
Chill, Paul. No need to break the nose of a man ready to solve your problems. all the problems.
Push his patience longer and he'll inject you with something that knocks you out, proceeding to then throw you in the meat grinder. I myself sat on this screen for like 30 minutes and nothing ever happened. I don't know if they broke it with an update, but this does completely lock you out of getting all achievements, so maybe I missed something? Sign the NDA like you're supposed to, and Doc will hand you the body cam that we as the player see the game through. I like the detail of not starting off in a first-person perspective, but the aspect of the body cam never comes up again after this, and it is very easy to forget that you're seeing through one. Maybe it could have been used more prevalently, maybe you could have been trying to get recordings off of it to use as evidence or something, figuring out how to hack it or whatever. They advertise that you're seeing through a body cam fairly heavily outside of the game, like it's a selling point, which is why I'm harping on that more than I might usually. But anyway, after putting that on, Doc hands you a PDA, injects you with something, and you pass out. Here is where I want to quickly mention this game's extremely stilted dialogue. Now, there is no hate meant towards the screenwriter for this game. May he rest in peace, but the script for Zoochosis is quite frankly one of the weirdest I've heard in a while. It feels like an alien wrote it. I think it may be in part due to a language barrier. Nobody in this game talks like a human. They sound like they're trying to meet the word count for a high school essay, but verbally. A lot of the jokes don't land at all, grammar is super funky, and there's a weird amount of unnecessary swearing.
Mobile fecal extractor. In simpler terms, a shit sucker. 100,000 a year, Paul. 100,000 fucking American dollars. You just have to collect the shit.
Not in combat or anything where it makes sense, but Doc likes to just cuss you out from outside the enclosure during the tutorial, and I imagine this could be a bit of a nuisance for people trying not to be slapped by YouTube policies. In fact, the strange way that Doc speaks was one of the key reasons people thought and still assume that this game's voices are all AI. I can confirm that none of the voices are AI. It's all the fault of the voice direction, or perhaps a lack of it. The poster child of the dialogue is Doc, aka Oliver Metzger, voiced by Tim Stevenson, mostly because he talks the most. But checking on Tim's YouTube channel, he can clearly do some pretty good acting, so I don't think it's his fault he was given a subpar script.
And yes, for your information, I can read too. Like that sign up there. Feed the bears, they're friendly, the bear said, reading the sign wrong.
Honestly, I think the voice fits for Doc too, so it's a shame it wasn't used well. So after Doc gets done injecting us with stuff, we wake up on the floor in another room where he informs us that he's taken our phone and locked us in for the night. He then directs us to follow him to learn how to do our job. So we meet him at the hub's cold room where the ingredients for animal food are stored. Don't make him wait very long, he'll complain a lot. He is extremely impatient, it takes him like a minute to get pissy. He smiles if you get close, but it's really weird. He just kinda bares his teeth at you like a chimp. Very creepy fellow.
When someone smiles at me, all I see is a chimpanzee begging for its life.
You need to grab 2 herbal bricks and 1 vegetable brick and load them into the brick trolley, which, by the way, is required for this room to open. Sometimes during the game, you'll need to grab more ingredients, and it's annoying to have to unload this thing and push it all the way over here just to be able to get another kind of food. I'd personally prefer a lever so that we could just come over here, grab the 1 new brick we need, put it on the trolley, and put the trolley back into the train, but oh well. I found it easiest to just grab a bunch of herbs and vegetables and 1 fish block if you're going to the penguin enclosure, and then never have to come back to the fridge unless you're using a strategy later on that requires meat. But you don't have to do that. It makes more sense later on when we get to the mutant animals part of the game. For future reference, if you somehow run out of herbs or veggies, there is a lever next to their storage units that will drop more. For some reason though, it is limited, so if you are an exceptionally bad cook, well, there is a very weird quirk with this food system. I figured that out when I tried to purposefully waste all the ingredients to see if I would be soft-locked. There is this machine in the back that the game never tells you about, and I tested out putting a random block in it. Putting any block in here will refill the associated machine by 1. At least that's what it says on the number next to it. I think the point of the recycler is for you to be able to get bricks off your cart if it's full and have nowhere else to put them. The main quirk I want to mention, when I exhausted the entire supply of herbs and then placed the 1 last herb block on the cart into this recycle thing, it said there was 1 left to drop, but when I actually dropped it, it produced 4 blocks. This leads me to believe that these machines literally are not programmed to know if you have less than 4 blocks in storage to drop. It's an oversight that I imagine most players would not encounter, but it should save you from getting stuck if you are the worst cook on Earth.
Take us 3 minutes until your doom. 3 minutes.
Yet, the game not saying anything about the recycling machine means that most people would just assume themselves to be stuck anyway. Lack of instruction is gonna be a big thing we keep running into, trust me. Also, removing the limit on food would just solve all of this at once, in my opinion. Get that trolley loaded, and Paul will be startled by a slam against the door nearby. Doc shrugs it off, and we head over to Katie, the train we'll be using to navigate the zoo. It won't move until the trolley is loaded into the refrigeration compartment. Do that, and we can head inside, where we are instructed to head to the giraffe enclosure. I guess both of us have very strong legs if nobody's swaying at all while this thing moves. Now that we're at the giraffe enclosure, Doc explains the basics of caring for the animals and determining their issues. First, we're gonna learn how to prepare their food, which is necessary to get them to defecate so we can test their poop. You will be hearing a lot about poop in this video, so have fun! Anyway, we gotta select the giraffe food and cut the bricks the correct amount. The game does not give you a measuring tool or anything, so you just gotta wing it with the laser and the fractions you learned in grade school. There is an achievement for getting it perfect, so I guess it isn't supposed to be straightforward. That's probably why they haven't allowed deviation from the recipe if you don't get it perfect. The deviation is listed before you get cooking, and usually it is pretty generous. Once the giraffe food is ready to go, we can head into the enclosure to give it to them. You can pet them too if you like. I must say that the enclosures in this game are pretty well designed and have some good sound design too, with footstep sounds for walking through hay, wet mud, and other floor types depending on the animal's preferences. The animals themselves are also quite well modeled and animated, and them having names is a nice bit of extra detail. Once you've poured the food in their trough, they'll come over to get it, and here is where I ran into a problem. You see, the animals in this game all have collision, which is normal for games, but they can also collide with each other, which in this case caused 2 of the giraffes to get stuck under this overhang, unable to get to the food, which in turn meant they were never gonna poop, and I would never be able to pass this part of the tutorial. So I reset my progress in the giraffe enclosure, and this time they didn't try to merge, which was great, and I was able to get them fed and steal their poop with the glamorously named shit sucker. After that, we need to grab the thermal imaging system and head out to scan the temperatures of the animals. I prefer to catch multiple in one go, because moving the camera with this thing is really slow and annoying, but sometimes they will just leave the view or get blocked by another animal. Either way, there's that. Yay, we got temperatures! That is actually all we need to do for the giraffes at the moment, but there is more to do when you're handling things on your own. Doc instructs us to head back to the train so we can make a medication to normalize the sick giraffe's temperature. When we get back, we need to put the shit sucker, never mind, I'm not calling it that, it's stupid, the vacuum, onto the storage compartment thingy for analysis. The train doors won't open until you do this. Once you can enter the train again, it's time for doctoral duties. Currently, we need to select the Temperalax medication and make a dose. That dose then needs to be loaded into the dart gun on our cart. Remember to press R or whatever key it is for you to actually load the gun, because I keep forgetting to do that. You should be able to see it with the name facing up inside the gun's chamber. Once it's loaded up, you don't have to take the cart back to the enclosure. You can just take the gun and head and dart the sick giraffe. This instantly cures it, and this enclosure has now been completed. Awesome. With nothing more to do here, we now have to take the train back to the hub, where Doc then takes his leave. Before doing so though, he gives us a little preview of what rewards we can expect from working here. Like this sick sports car, which he may not have for long if he keeps driving it like that. Oh god, no, Doc, look out! Oh, he has AirPods in! Oh, and you might have noticed the lady standing outside that we just kind of ignored. That is our lovely wife, Lily, who doesn't take well to being shafted since she starts banging on the door after witnessing Doc break every speeding law in existence. You can answer her or continue ignoring her. It's usual to answer her, so I did this run, and she'll show concern for Paul being locked in. He shrugs that off and suggests she wait for him to grab some meat from the cold room, since he's of the opinion it's gotta be better than the packaged meals they've been having at home. Come on, man, animal food can't be better than 5-minute pizzas from Target. That's what I live on, and I'm doing fine.
fun.
Okay, so now we're on our own, wife or no wife. The goal now is to head to another enclosure to continue doing our job, but I'd recommend picking up some chemicals from the vet box on the wall in the exit area before you do. And if you need to refill the brick trolley, which you will if you only put on as much food as Doc told you to, make sure you do that too. Grab some fish while you're at it, because this run we will be doing all enclosures available to us. I say that because when we don't start the game in tutorial mode, you'll usually only be doing 3 of them for some reason. Technically, we are only doing 3 properly this time because the giraffes got cut short, so I chose to visit the gorilla enclosure first. On my way in, I can hear a phone call. The phone is in the storage room, and you don't have to answer, but if you do, you'll hear a woman ask you to look for her missing husband, CJ. We can do that right now, but I don't, mostly because I forgore, but if you do want to, then you're able to just reverse course back to the hub, where you can find his locker. But you can't call her back just yet. Finding CJ's locker immediately is actually required to get the best outcome in the enclosures, as it unlocks additional medicine recipes that allow you to heal infected animals without having to send them to a farm up north. But perhaps you like violence. Or you don't realize this because the game is, once again, incredibly unclear about this new development. It is at least a little more clear than usual about this one because you can read CJ's logs in your PDA, but you never get urged to do so, honestly, so I never knew to. Okay, gorilla time. After whatever this was. I don't remember my thought process here. At any time, you can check out the storage rooms outside the enclosures for additional chemical complexes and some other floppy disks you can insert into your PDA to read entries from other zookeepers or staff. It's just lore stuff, I just want the chemicals. Well, on entering in here, they're already puking, so that's a great sign. While gorillas can throw up in real life, did you know what they can't throw? Fastballs, apparently. They can throw balls and other things, but only at about 20 miles per hour. I don't know, it came up while I was looking to see if they can really vomit. With the gorillas, we follow the same steps as the giraffes, but you'll notice there are additional symbols next to the gorillas' names that don't stop at temperature. We still have poop and temperature, yeah, but we also have this noise symbol and a water droplet. These signify noise spectrum and blood. Both of these are required for a full analysis of the animal's symptoms, and we cannot accurately determine their ailment without them. When I tell you they hate this noise thingy, they will run full speed away from you when you try to get their measurement. It is very annoying because the measurement fails and resets if they get too far away. You can tranquilize them if you need to, but it's tedious to run back and make tranq, so I tended to just wait until they were in a corner and then I jumped them. The blood is a lot easier to do. Simply approach the animal, and when they aren't moving, click to take their blood. Make sure to get measurements of the noise and blood for every animal. You can see if you have an animal's samples by the symbols near its name. Ones you have completed will be green, or red if they're sick, and ones that require submission for analysis, such as blood and poop, will have a question mark over them, meaning you got them but you haven't analyzed them yet. When we have everything, we can head back to the train to figure out what's going on with the animals. At the vet station, it's easiest to click on the red symptoms to narrow down what disease is present in the analysis instead of scrolling down looking for a match. The gorillas have bad temperature and bad noise spectrum, so it's apparently meningitis. Therefore, now we gotta navigate to the crafting menu to create the necessary medicine, which we can determine by cross-checking the definition of the disease with the description of each medicine. The appropriate medicine isn't always gonna say, like, cure for meningitis or whatever disease you have, so sometimes you will need to know what the disease causes and use that as a basis for what cure you look for. For example, if you need to cure helminthiasis, an infection caused by parasitic worms, you're gonna want to use InfestCare, an anti-parasitic substance. Thankfully, meningitis is a pretty easy one, so we're gonna make 2 darts for that, one for each sick animal, and then head on back in and fix them up. After the gorillas are no longer goril,
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
we get a phone call. If you pick it up, Paul immediately assumes it to be Linda, so he apologizes for not being able to look for CJ yet. It's actually Doc on the other end. Busted, huh? Paul tells him what's up anyway, and Doc, surprisingly not upset with us for snooping as usual, lets slip that CJ might not be the most faithful husband. But Doc didn't call to complain about adultery. He called because he's got a delivery of new food ingredients we gotta take care of. In this case, it's meat that we need to grind. But not before Paul loses his lunch in the hallway on the trek back to the train. Something's not right here. But this zoo didn't offer medical insurance, so we're pulling up our bootstraps and rolling up stop this meat delivery. Yeah, so this game has a warning at the start about nudity. Wondered where that came in? Here is where that comes in. Thank goodness the game has a nudity filter, but perhaps it's a little unclear?
I thought on meant like the filter was on. Jesus Christ!
So the meat is human meat. How joyous. Somehow Doc just knows we saw the meat, so he's already calling. Paul's a bit shaken up, and he lets him know it. Doc laughs it off and explains, finally, the main draw of the game, the infected animals. There's something called the mother that produces parasites at a constant rate, and these parasites infect animals, turning them into monsters. These infected animals require a different diet, meat mostly, and that is why we're grinding people. Paul is understandably caught off guard and remembers that he gave some meat to his wife and kid, meaning he fed his family human meat. Doc laughs that off too, letting Paul consider that a punishment for the petty theft of the food. Hanging up the phone, we head out to get the meat situation taken care of, and suddenly the girl wakes up screaming. And there's another phone call. Perfect opportunity to tell Doc off for almost having us grind up a live girl, who is apparently not supposed to still be alive after Doc gave her a bunch of xylazine, a drug commonly linked to overdose in humans, but normally meant for veterinary tranquilizers. Either way, the fact that she's still kicking is a small miracle, but we're still expected to grind her. Well, I like being employed, so in she goes! So, you know, the whole feed the infected animals meat thing wasn't just exposition. It's actually meant to be useful information. One of the few later game things the game actually bothers to explain, but the actual timing of doing this is still weird, despite it being very useful now that we are going to start dealing with the infected animals. Now that we know about the mutant animal problem, they're gonna start cropping up. From now on, when we visit an enclosure, one animal will be infected and will transform if you don't correctly identify it or pacify it in time. There are multiple ways to deal with an infected animal. The game is clear about only one, which is gonna lead me on a slightly different tangent here. The vagueness of the solution for a mutated animal led a lot of negative reviews to appear, dogging on the game's repetitiveness, because the most obvious way to deal with a mutant is to shoot it with lethal injection, leading people to believe that that was the main and possibly only way of doing so, causing the gameplay loop to stagnate pretty quickly as go to this place, find symptoms, uh-oh monster time, shoot monster, go to next place and repeat. When you actually know what's going on, it gets a little more interesting, although it is still a little repetitive. At least, you need to use your brain. Working with the mutant animals is a bit like finding an imposter in Among Us.
Don't let him talk first, because he's gonna sound much smarter than me and it's gonna fuck everything up.
You gotta pay attention to the behaviors of the animals in the exhibit, and remember which animal was showing what problems. Then, keep that in mind after you've collected all data for analysis. If an animal returns a clean bill of health, aka all green symbols, but it was still throwing up and acting funny, it's probably the infected one. By acting funny, I mean exhibiting symptoms of zoochosis, a disease specifically seen in captive animals. You can see this by it screaming, shaking its head, doing a funny little jig, such and such. You can also check a suspicious animal with your UV light for any scratches, which should confirm your suspicion if present. But there's not much you can do to help the animal right away, so I'm not sure why there's a way to tell which animal is bad immediately. It's pointless because once you've found at least one red symptom, the next time you enter the enclosure, the infected animal will mutate. So there isn't a time window to be able to make a cure for it and administer it before it mutates. On another topic, and this is a really stupid one, the mutant now has a chance to eat any of the non-infected animals in the enclosure. If it manages to do so, it doesn't matter. Yeah, I'm serious. There are no consequences for letting every single animal in every enclosure die. No serious consequences, anyway. I mean, hell, if you want to speedrun the game, you can literally euthanize every single one as soon as you enter an enclosure and the game just doesn't give a shit. Really? For a game with so many endings, what the heck? Somehow very few of the good endings depend on any normal animals making it out of a night with Paul Connolly Zoo Cop alive. It is actually easier to just go into the enclosure, shoot them all up, and then you don't have to heal them, and you can just get in and out if you take care of the mutant. So honestly, so much for rescue the animals, huh? A disappointing lack of consequences also comes into play when you are attacked by an infected animal. Unlike the euthanasia stuff, it's not entirely free of punishment, but But you can't die from being attacked by a mutant. Your punishment is an annoying cutscene where you vomit, can't move, then it's back to chasing around the mutant. Every tackle and vomit combo is a progression of Paul's mutation though. Yeah, by the way, Doc injected you with the mutation at the start of the game. So let Paul be hit too much and you'll get locked into one of the bad endings. How much too much is pretty unclear though. It's not like you have a meter and Paul's infected hands only look like 2 different ways the whole game, with both seeming to be dependent on story progression and not your screw-ups. Though if for some reason you're really looking to get one of those infected progression endings, a decent strategy for that I figured out is to constantly aim your gun at every single mutant that you see, because it pisses them off and they will run straight for you. For some reason, just colliding normally with a mutant does not initiate an attack. They don't care at all. They'll just block your path. If you are a nice person and want to cure the animals or just get a slightly better ending, here is what to do. First, you still have to collect the data to diagnose them. That includes feeding them the normal food, collecting their poop, plus getting the noise spectrum and their blood. Make sure you get all of that on your very first visit into the enclosure, because this is the only time there won't be a mutant to deal with, unless you make a meat meal when you head back to the train. Doing this will allow you to cleanly pacify the mutant once it crops up as soon as you return, reversing the mutation temporarily while you get more blood from the animals without you having to worry about any of them getting eaten in the meantime. Do make sure you remember which animal was mutated though. I forgot, and then I forgot which one I was supposed to be shooting with the cure. If you shoot the wrong animal with the cure, it'll throw up, so that's your cue to notice that, oops, maybe I should, write that down next time. Thing is, making a meat meal messes with your endings, because to get meat, you have to grind people, and grinding that first lady especially just destroys any chance of a good ending. So it's better to get good with making cures fast, because the only other way to calm a mutant is to trank it, and each dose only gives you a minute to get more animal blood, get back to the train, and make a cure. Something I learned the hard way: the cure will not work if you shoot the mutant while it's asleep, and neither will lethal injections. So wait till it wakes up. Anyway, why get more blood? Well, the cure for the mutant requires it as an ingredient, and analyzing the blood for a diagnosis takes all of your vials, so you can't use them for the cure. And how do we know which cure will fix the mutant? Well, the parasites mimic the same disease as the rest of the enclosure, so we need to make the cure for, quote, the parasite mimicking whatever disease. If it was in the gorilla enclosure from earlier, we would make the cure for the parasite mimicking meningitis. You'll get 3 doses of it, but don't waste any. The 3-segment health bar for the animal indicates it's gonna take 3 shots to fix or dispose of it. Each shot with a cure dart will turn a segment of it green, and each shot with a lethal injection will eliminate a segment. I dislike the way this gun aims. It has no crosshair or reticle, so you're stuck staring at the butt of the thing instead and loosely guessing. Thankfully, most animals are pretty wide and hard to miss. Minor annoyance. When you've gotten 3 shots into the animal, whether it be with the bye-bye juice or the cure, it'll fall and spit up the parasite. If you killed the animal, it'll remain in its mutant form with the parasite hanging out around the mouth area. If you cured it, it'll revert to normal somehow and vomit it back up onto the ground. Funny thing to note here, the transformation sequence is super lame and is basically just the reverse of the original mutation sequence, which was just a dissolve effect between 2 different models. So I'm willing to bet that, despite a patch note mentioning the monster transformations were polished, that was a lie, and it just happens off screen now so you can't see that it's lame. Instead, the monster blows the door off the hinges before you can get to it and roars at you before toddling off. And I've managed to confirm that the mutation sequence is still totally lame, because it will automatically happen if you just randomly euthanize an animal when you walk into the enclosure. The mutant will automatically mutate, and here is where you can see the questionable animation. So let's just jump to after we get the first mutant taken care of. We ground up the girl in this run, so we can't get any good endings out of all 23 this game has. After grinding or not grinding the woman, we're pretty much locked into our current route, because irritatingly nothing we do in the animal exhibits seems to matter. From here, our only option is to continue handling the enclosures as we prefer, whether that be by euthanizing or curing the infected animals. This run could only result in 6 of the 23 possible endings. Each ending is basically an in-game cutscene followed by by a small paragraph explaining what happened after. Since in this run we gave the meat to Lily, ground the woman, and progressed doing everything else Doc told us to do like a good little boy, the infection progresses through Paul to the point where he's too paralyzed to leave the building as Lily meets him at the door with breakfast in the morning. As she waits for him to leave, Doc arrives and kidnaps her, then opens the door to knock Paul out with a swift kick. Paul wakes up to be greeted with Doc opening the door to where the mother waits, allowing her to eat him, and it is revealed shortly after that she later ate Lily as well. This ending can vary if Paul managed to warn Lily about the origin of the meat. I'll explain how to do that later. If he does, she won't show up to the zoo in the morning and therefore won't be kidnapped and eaten. No such luck for Paul, though. An additional variant triggers if you don't give Lily the meat and ignore her calls from outside, causing her to call the police. But Doc has friends with the police, so this doesn't end well for Lily. Both of you are then fed to the mother. Regardless of what ending you got, completing one playthrough rewards you with New Game Plus mode. This mode is free of any tutorials, so all enclosures will have a mutant animal right away. Every time you beat a run, you will unlock new animal enclosures to visit. The old ones from your previous run will be made unavailable, so basically you have a random set of animals every run. This is an interesting way to switch up gameplay, but why not just have all animals available in New Game Plus and leave the left half locked for the base game? Not being able to go to any animal you want in what I'd consider the true mode of the game, the version with no hand-holding tutorials, feels odd. New Game Plus gives me the opportunity to move on to the better endings. You know, the ones where you don't become food for mommy. Ugh, why did I write that? Everything starts off more or less the same, up until we get our meat delivery. Instead of throwing her in the grinder, help the girl down and Paul will lay her on the couch to wait for her to wake up. Skipping ahead to after you're finished with the next animal enclosure, she's recovered and gotten the axe out of the emergency case near the big locked door and is now using it to try and bash the locked door open. When you approach her, two things can happen depending on how far your mutation has progressed. Outcome 1, the girl will still be trying to bash the door in with an axe when she wakes up. When you approach the girl, the two of you will get acquainted and you'll learn that she's a journalist. That being why she got kidnapped here, Doc didn't want any of this getting out in the news, obviously. Outcome 2, and you can tell if you've got this one if Sarah is standing in the middle of the room with the axe and not bashing the door. Paul will react nervously to the axe and Sarah will tell him he smells, encouraging him to freshen up. When he goes to do so, she'll lock the door behind him, trapping him in the bathroom for the rest of the night. This outcome means the end of your game. It is classed as one of the game's bad endings. It is pretty much a fancy variant of when you get really infected and then go back to the hub and get paralyzed walking up to Doc. This time, instead of having the upper hand in the situation, Doc is caught off guard when he arrives in the morning to see how Paul did, and is confused to find the bathroom locked with him inside. The mutated Paul gets the jump on Doc and is now free to go after Sarah, who's still here, likely due to all the doors still being locked, to keep Paul inside for his probation. It's not specified what happens to her after, but it's probably nothing good. If you avoid these pitfall endings, there are some other things you can do to spell a better future for your compatriots. The true bestest ending can be obtained by setting yourself on the path after rescuing Sarah and doing what other method you want for eliminating the mutant animals. Cure them lethal injection doesn't matter, just make sure you vacuum up the parasite they had. You need every parasite from every enclosure, cause I bet you didn't realize we were actually collecting and storing them on the train? That's important now. So you're gonna need to do all the enclosures however you see fit, and at some point you'll be required to open up your bio-waste filter, did you even know you had that? To get out this severed hand. You are forced to do this, so don't worry about missing it. Once you have the hand, you can use it to open the door Sarah was trying to get into. It leads into a lab of sorts under the zoo, where Paul's phone was being kept alongside doctorates of Doc's, revealing his real name to be Oliver Metzger. If you didn't rescue Sarah but still wanted to rescue your wife, this is how you would warn her not to come to the zoo and not to eat the meat. Use the hand to get down here and get your phone to call her. With Sarah with you though, you're able to use a floppy disk found in CJ's locker. But she doesn't know the password since she can only guess it if she knows who came up with it. Thankfully, it turns out she's been sleeping with CJ, so she absolutely does know the guy. And we're in. It also turns out that the little adulterer's been cooking up a recipe for a poison that can kill the mother, and Sarah finds it on the floppy disk. With this information, we're good to to make that poison. The crucial ingredient, however, is a female parasite. This is where the parasite storage comes in. I goofed this my first time, but what you're meant to do is deduce which parasite among the 4 you've collected is the female. That's why it's important to grab every parasite. To view the parasites, you can open a box in the train, and for more information on the possible female, you can read the information panel to the right of the canisters. Different species of parasites will act differently towards their female. One will try to break out of the glass to get to her, and another won't care at all about her, with she herself doing all the moving. That one's easy to tell, but with the ones where the males try to get at the female, you can use the detection screen to swap them around to see where the female probably is, depending on where the males start clawing at once moved. Once you know which one you need, just squish her and don't forget to grab the vial. Then you can make the poison for the mother at the vet station and bring it back to Sarah, where she reveals that the only way you can administer the poison is with food, and that food has to be alive. You can choose to inject the poison into Sarah or into yourself. For the sake of the best ending, we're gonna use ourselves, but Sarah doesn't let Paul go through with it, and Paul can't do the injection himself because he's becoming paralyzed. Sarah lies him down in front of the mother's cage and hides, waiting for Doc to arrive, who prepares to feed Paul to the mother, but isn't able to before Sarah jumps him and injects him with the poison. If you got the right parasite, the mother will notice her dinner immediately and eat Doc right up, falling victim to the poison. As the mother dies, any currently infected organisms are cut off from the host and are cured, so Paul vomits up his parasite, free from the paralysis. He and Sarah are both free now to head outside to where Doc's car is parked, smashing it in a final fuck you to the facility. But only if you didn't cure all the animals correctly. If you did, you get to keep the car. Cool, so it gets you something besides an achievement. As a quick aside, there's some plot about the foundation that owns the zoo. I think the CMS Watkins Foundation. Sarah's dad runs it. She'll mention after the mother is killed that the body cam footage will serve as evidence of their wrongdoings. Well, I didn't really get this bit, honestly. When she said, "F you, Dad," at the end of the game, I thought she meant Doc, but nah. Okay, so what about if you get a male parasite for the poison? Well, simply put, it does nothing. The mother just eats whoever was injected and then also eats everyone else nearby.
Get him. Yeah! Oh, everybody! Everybody goes in.
Which I have to admit is kind of funny, but I also could imagine could be pretty frustrating for anyone who wasn't super clear on why it didn't work, given that to have another shot, you gotta go through another entire playthrough. But an additional variant of both male and female poison endings can be gotten if you inject Sarah instead of yourself. This is the final choice for who gets the poison. You don't get the twist of injecting Doc this time. If the poison used a female parasite, Mother eats Sarah and is killed according to plan, with Paul vomiting out his parasite without Doc noticing. He's then able to sneak up on Doc and use the axe to get rid of him, escaping after without Sarah. Now, we're not at the end yet. Gonna cover the game's initial reception and why it was so poor, but first, Zoochosis does have some pros, and I can't in good conscience just ignore the effort put into this thing.
Hey, disclaimer, I'm recording this part. I got sick again. It's great this time. This time, it's a cold, so that's awesome. Anyway. I mentioned the sound design earlier. They put a lot of thought into the ambient noises of the zoo, from the rumbling of ventilation in the hub area to the animals walking around and vocalizing. The place feels alive, even if a bit grimy and not really like somewhere I'd want to spend my weekdays. I think that's the point, not wanting to hang out in the murder zoo. There's attention to detail otherwise when you look for it. I didn't even notice this at first, but it's present in some animations. Like when you cure the elephant, it will take the parasite out of its mouth with its trunk, much like a real elephant would, rather than just throwing it up like some of the other animals in the game. The monster designs are great, properly unnerving and very well modeled. Lots of body horror and gore for those who like that kind of stuff, and no details are spared. Besides just the monsters, I think everything is well modeled. I know the humans have some weird lip sync, but they look properly gritty for a gritty game with fitting grim facial expressions. I was always drawn to how Sarah looks like she hasn't slept well in weeks. Can't say I would look better if I got drugged and strung upside down for hours. There's just so much less stuff here that looks like it came from an asset store compared to Sparky Marky's asset collection. The developers clearly care this time. They're constantly pushing updates for this thing, anything from quality of life additions to bug fixes to just extra stuff to see, like new animal toys in the enclosures. They're also very active on the forums for the game, and I see them apologizing and trying to help anyone having issues quite a lot. I'm confident that they weren't trying to scam anybody with this, they just messed up. Okay, so it's not all bad, but what pissed people off when this thing first came out? What's still pissing them off? Yeah, the game's still pretty mediocre, but it isn't criminally offensive. Well, let's take a look at all of it. It's an adventure of false promises and lofty goals set by a team that wanted to do so much more than they could. The music isn't all that interesting at many points. I think the only track I liked was the title theme. The chase theme is really repetitive and gave me a headache. The enclosure gameplay loop is not interesting enough to justify replaying the game, or heck, to even continue playing. Once you've done one, you've done them all, basically. The only difference is in aesthetic, because you're seeing new animals and new props. But besides that, you do the same stuff over and over. Food, poop, temps, maybe a UV scan, blood. Okay, let's diagnose. Oh no, there is a monster. The monster is the only time the enclosure changes. And while the monsters are interesting, especially given their differing abilities, like the moose's psychic powers, you could just play every enclosure just to see what the monster does and then just be done with the game because nothing that comes before that is revolutionary. I've been working my most recent part-time job while making this video. Coming home from it to play this has made me feel like I didn't leave. There are moments of subpar animation, most obviously in the incredibly lame transformation and detransformation animations and the lip sync on the human characters. Everybody reminds me of a fish with how wide they have to open their mouths to speak. Bit of a nitpick, but animals being curable after mutating makes like no sense. Literally how? The zebra was biologically reversed. You don't just get better after that. I think it would have made more sense to have emphasized curing the animals before they mutated, because it's not like you can't tell beforehand who's the culprit with the tools you have. After mutating, I just feel like story-wise, they shouldn't be savable. The game is way too short, especially for the price tag. It's $25 to play, and you'll be here for about 1 to 2 hours. I've played much longer games for half the price. This was advertised as an experience that would be a lot longer and a lot more involved. This isn't a great horror game. It's a good atmospheric title, but in terms of good scares, it's pretty weak. It mostly relies on sudden noises and visuals to get you to jump. I didn't come for cheap old man jump scares. There really should have been a save and load feature. To get new endings, you must replay the entire game. With how repetitive everything is, the endings aren't rewarding enough to justify going through the same tedium over and over and over. I get that determining choices are littered throughout the experience, so allowing the player to control where their starting point is would make it so there isn't any writing that needs to change to accommodate such a feature. The New Game Plus feature is completely pointless when it's literally just a restart button, but without the tutorial. And just leave it called New Game Plus. It does not need to track how many times I've been through this. I mean, that's kind of embarrassing. The monsters are far too predictable. There's no nuance to their behavior besides their different powers. They don't do anything where you'd need to dodge or do something cool. They just run around and get mad when you aim a gun at them. Heck, half of them don't even do that. The fear of the mutation wanes pretty fast when you know exactly when it's coming after you leave the enclosure. Sure, the loud sound might make you jump once, but there's no substance to it outside of that. I think the suspense could have really benefited from the mutation time being random. Since the animal is perfectly savable at any time, not knowing when the mutation could occur would help the atmosphere quite a bit. Lastly, the whole mechanics problem. Barely anything gets explained, so the player is mostly blind while figuring out how to play the game. Half of the main tools go unmentioned in the tutorial. It is assumed that you read a bunch of wall posters and just automatically know what they mean, like that this one means you take this tool and you use it to scan animals for these things. I don't know, man, I don't think that we should just be assuming you'll get all that from one picture. Overall, the main con of Zoochosis is it's just not the game the trailers promised. Well, draws up my suspenders like an old-timey prospector. This one's been a long time coming, hasn't it? Sorry for the wait. It's been quite the weird few weeks for me. First I get employed, yay! But that starts taking a bit more of my time. Then I get what has been probably the worst sinus infection of my life. My back is knotting up constantly due to headaches. Half my body's numb and responsive half the time. My head's constantly pounding. Then I got a cold halfway through this video. Not being able to use your right hand on a consistent schedule throws a bit of a wrench in finishing videos, huh? Maybe I should learn to use my computer with my feet or something. So yeah, I know Zoochosis has been out for a hot minute and I'm late as hell, but I think having had to wait to finish this is a good thing actually. I haven't seen anyone take an honest, in-depth look at the current state of the game, since everyone kind of just forgot about it after they were done playing off how bad it was at launch. So even if I was a bit negative, I hope this has been interesting. Anyway, I gotta blow my nose. Cue the pre-recorded sound clip I use at the end of every episode. This has been Glamrock Dusky, and remember, have a phasorific day!